Okay, looking at Colossians 2:14. Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross. So a lot of people would say that these are the commandments. If that's the case, then 1 Corinthians chapter 7 will be contradictory. Hebrews chapter 4:8 will be contradicting. Revelation 22:14 will be contradictory. The whole of 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John would be contradictory. Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances. What is the handwriting of ordinances? Is that not a fine? Did Jesus not go to the cross and die for your sins? Are the sins not the fines? You see, under the law of sin and death, there was a punishment. In lots of cases, you were stoned. One of those things was breaking the Sabbath. You'll be stoned if you broke the Sabbath. Adultery, stoned. And there's many other cases where you'd be stoned. So Jesus took the punishment away, nailing it to the cross. The commandments were not nailed to the cross. If you go to 16 of the same chapter, Colossians 2:16, let no man therefore judge you in meat, or in drink, or in respect of a holy day, or of a new moon, or of the Sabbath days. Now here, it is small s, and it's plural days. Go to another Bible, you'll find that it's now singular. In a newer version of the Bible, it's now singular. It says, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body or the substance is of Christ. So what was the reason of keeping the ceremonial Sabbath days? You need to read your Old Testament to find out more. What was the reason for that? Is Christ replacing God? Because if he replaces God, then you have replacement theology. If God and Christ is the same person, you didn't have the gospel. Because according to the commandments, there's only one God, one Lord. So now, if you have a second person, replacement theology. So Jesus preaches something different. Jesus says, I've not come to abolish the law. He said, till heaven and earth pass away. Heaven and earth has not passed away. So that means your understanding is weak. So here he's saying, don't judge a man in new moon Sabbaths. So if you read your Old Testament, you'll see when you see the moon, it'll be this feast. When you see this moon, it'll be that feast. Tell me, is there a new moon every Saturday? Every Friday evening to Saturday evening, is there a new moon? No. Because the lunar Sabbath cycle, if I'm not mistaken, works on a 29.5 day cycle. If you take 29.5 and divide it by 7, you can't get a new moon every Friday now, can you? Friday evening, you can't. So it's clearly evident that the ceremonial feast works with a new moon. Ask a Muslim, how does he keep Eid? He counts the moons. It's the same belief. It's the same understanding. Both Muslims and Jews use the moon. So he's saying, because you've come into this faith, let's don't judge you in keeping these ceremonial days. Is commandment number 4 ceremonial? Or is it a commandment? Is it linked to a feast? The feasts are linked to new moons. The weekly Sabbath is not linked to a new moon. It is commanded on all men to keep the Sabbath day. Don't forget that the commandments is the whole duty of man. Now, our so-called Christians quote this verse totally, not having any understanding, neither do they look at the Hebrew words to make sense of it. But they just go, because they've never read the Old Testament, they read verses. You get Christians who read verses and Christians who read the whole Bible from cover to cover. Which type of Christian are you? A deluded Christian, most likely. Those who have the knowledge of truth, they follow truth. Those who have the knowledge of fables, follow fables. Okay, looking at Barnes' notes, let's read from here. There is doubtless reference to those days in this place, since the word is used in the plural number, and the apostles does not refer particularly to the Sabbath properly so called. There is no evidence from this passage that he would teach that there was no obligation to observe any holy time, for there is not the slightest reason to believe that he meant to teach that one of the 10 commandments had ceased to be binding on mankind. If he had used the word in the singular number, the Sabbath, it would then, of course, have been clear
that he meant to teach that the commandments had ceased to be binding, and that a Sabbath was no longer to be observed. But the use of the term in the plural number and the connection show that he had his eye on the great number of days which were observed by the Hebrews as festivals, as a part of their ceremonial and typical law, and not to the moral law, namely the Ten Commandments. So reading this part clearly shows us that no way in Colossians 2:16 is he saying that the Sabbath day ceases to exist. I will read this part one more time. If he had used the word in the singular number, the Sabbath, it would then, of course, have been clear that he meant to teach that the commandments had ceased to be binding, and that a Sabbath was no longer to be observed. But the use of the term is in the plural number, and the connections show that he had his eye on the great number of days which were observed as festivals. So Colossians 2:16 is talking about festivals. These were the ceremonial Sabbaths, not the Shabbat, not the Friday evening to Saturday evening Shabbat. It's very clear in Barnes' notes. So, fellow theologian, teaching for yourselves doctrines of men.